YouTube. If you guys didn't know, these are live streamed to YouTube, so if you ever miss a week and you want to catch up, you can look on YouTube. I mean, she's kind of figuring out the sound right now, so hopefully YouTube has sound, but that's okay. It always does, it's just whether it's quiet or loud enough. I don't want this to swing in my face as I'm talking. Hello. I'm like the only one. Oh, great. No, it's just not close enough. Got it, Richard? There we go. There we go. I got it. Hello. Wild, wild world out there. I'm the only one that ever watches these things back, so just kidding. We have like 15 views each week. It's pretty cool. Yeah, right? You know, when you talked, we had like 40 some odd views. You were like, right? So that song, Goodness of God, is kind of really relevant here as we're going through the book of Ecclesiastes. Because it's a little depressing, the book. If you kind of read it for like the bits and pieces throughout it and not in its entire context, it can be depressing here and there. For those of you who don't know, we're going through the book of Ecclesiastes this term. Not everybody has been here every week, so I kind of want to give you a little bit of context before we begin. So Garrett opened us up for the first 2 weeks and talked about how this book is wisdom literature, and it seeks to demonstrate the purpose of our life here. The book is introduced by some anonymous author and then follows the story and teachings and preaching of this guy. Most people believe is Solomon. It's a son of David. And Garrett described in the first week the thesis of the book, which is that everything in this world is meaningless under the sun. Vanities of vanities is what you'll hear throughout the book over and over again, which I really enjoyed that connection that Garrett made during communion with vanity, that theme. So that word meaningless, the Bible Project, if you haven't heard of the Bible Project, it's a great resource out there. They do a really great job of understanding that of describing that word meaningless. In its original language, the word is hevel. And it doesn't really translate to English very well, but it's really complex word, and meaningless doesn't really give it the weight that it is. It's kind of like a vapor or smoke. I'm going to do a bad job explaining it, but look it up. It's so complex, it's like you can see it like a vapor, but you can't quite grab it. You can't contextualize it all. And that's what this book is getting at, is that life is hevel under the sun without the proper context of God giving it purpose and meaning. Garrett also talked with us the first few words of the preacher in this story, and how he sought in his life to find fulfillment in everything, in wisdom, in knowledge, in laughter, parties, wine, all of the above. He tried to find meaning in life, in the work that he does, the beauty and the wealth he created, the gardens. But he had come to realize that it's all hevel. Ben talked last week, the third week, about the value of our lives. The fact that our work and our wealth we build up isn't what matters, but the fact that we're created in God's image is what gives us purpose and value. He talked about his friend David, who was reliant on others to live, and how when he passed away, there was mourning and sadness, and we innately believe like all lives are have meaning and value and dignity, and that's not given apart from God. In a life under the sun, right? I've never been so nervous. There's a lot of people in this room. Our lives have no purpose apart from that God-given. So we live and we internalize this idea that we have innate value, but without the proper context of God giving to us in this worldview, it's all meaningless. It's all hevel. We don't want you to leave koinonia each week with this term being depressed after each lesson. But we want to get to that goal that this life on our own, living in these repetitive and meaningless circles of life, sex, drugs, rock and roll, trying to find meaning in your work, in your school, in social status, whatever it may be, these various escapes, family, whatever you find fulfillment in, is not actually going to give you purpose, life, fulfillment that you're looking for. It doesn't give our life meaning, but what really fulfills us is God. So that being said, let's take a look into chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes. I like to read it all, so we will go through it all, just to give context. So this is a really beautiful poem that starts it up. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to tear, and a time to sow. A time to keep silence, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace. This concept that there is a season for everything. Now, this idea that there's a season for everything is something that can be contemplated endlessly, something to think about. There's a season for everything. So, what season are you in right now? God puts us in various different seasons. And if there's a season for everything, odds are you're probably going through a lot of seasons at the same time. So think about that imagery, right? We live in Oregon, so it's not that hard. We go through the same seasons during spring and fall. It's like snow, rain, wind, fall, leaves. So what seasons does God have you in right now, overlapping? For me, I'm currently in a season of singleness in my life. Now, obviously, I have a boyfriend, but I don't have a husband and kids to tend to. I really only just have to focus on myself. I only have to provide for myself. I'm no longer in school, so I'm working. I'm in this in-between state, as obviously marriage and family is a goal in life. I'd like to have a house with pets. I have to deal with the season that God puts me in, and I have to be content in this season. So here's an example. I do real estate photography, and I went on this shoot last week, and it was a property, and there was a bunch of barn kittens, and this kitten was a runt, and it was so cute. Mackenzie can testify to this because I FaceTimed her, trying to convince her to get an outdoor cat for the Harriet house. It was so cute. It fit in my hand, and it would just crawl up my leg, and it would walk around the property, and its tiny little legs would try to keep up with me, and it just stayed by my side the entire shoot. And I got some B-roll of it, but the editor didn't put it in the video. Yeah, they're lost. But yeah, so I wanted this cat. But that's not the season that God has me in right now, mainly because Mackenzie won't let me have a cat. But she's not my mom, she's my house mom. I didn't need to clarify that. Because you're only like 10 years old, not even 6 years older than me. So, although I really wanted that cute little strong-willed kitten that just kept meowing at me and just kept following me around, however, I know that being a cat owner is ultimately not the season that God has me in at the moment. And I have to be content in that. And so there's a season that God has you in. Do you ever feel like you're not in the right season? You want to speed things along, right? If I get this, if I do that, then I'll feel happy, right? You shouldn't be experiencing or feeling the things that you do. You may be asking God the question, why? Why is this happening to me right now? Why do you have me in this season? And it's natural to feel that way. The preacher is saying here that there is time for death, for destruction, weeping, mourning, losing, tearing, silence, hate, war. There's a time for these things. There are seasons that we get put in. And sometimes we feel like those seasons will never end. They just keep going. However, he is also saying that there's a time for new life, harvesting, building up, laughing, dancing, embracing, love, and peace. And it's hard to believe that God's timing is perfect, and it's hard to remember that when we're in the darker seasons of life. However, his ways are not our ways. It's Isaiah, right? God calls us to be content in every circumstance. Paul the Apostle went through so many highs and lows in his life. He was imprisoned and tormented, whatever it may be. And he writes here in Philippians 4:11 through 13, I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in every season. Whether well-fed or hungry, whether living or in plenty or in want, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. You may be in a season of poverty, in depression, grief, stress, or any other season. But just know that with all seasons to come to an end with seasonal change, new life springs forth, right? So let's go back to the scriptures here in Ecclesiastes and highlight some more of these thoughts. So Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 9 through 11. What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the busyness that God has given the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from beginning to end. God makes everything beautiful in its time. He has also made eternity known in a way that allows us to contemplate our eternal existence. The guy in this book, the whole entire book, right? He makes that greater purpose innate in us, but only reveals so much of the picture that we can continue to yearn for him and what he has for us. We all yearn for life's purpose greater than what this world has to offer. We all yearn for restoration and for new life. God wants us to yearn for him and to trust in his greater plan, that he will make everything beautiful in its time. Why do you think Jesus came? So that we can have new life in him. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Philippians 4:13. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Now let's go to verses 12 through 15. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that every man should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is the gift of God to man. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it nor taken away from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which has already been, that which is to be, that has already been, and God seeks what has been driven away. These are the preacher's perceptions, right? He's exploring life, he's figuring things out, and he perceives these things. Through his examination of all the vanities in life, he perceives that this is what we should do, that we should honor God by partaking in the pleasures he's given us because he is ultimately in control. The absolute sovereignty of God and his purposes are meant to bring human beings to a sense of humble reverence and awe for him. Those are not my words, those are the words of my study Bible, just so you know. The absolute sovereignty of God and his purposes are meant to be bring human beings to a sense of humble reverence and awe of him. Again, it's God that brings us purpose and joy. Within the dark seasons, we trust that God's in the work and that God is good. So let's continue in verse 16. As the preacher moves on to examining the vanities of life. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness, and in the place of righteousness, even there was wickedness. And I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beast is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath. And the man has no advantage over the beast, for all is vanity. Right? This is in the context of the world. All go to one place, and all are from the dust, and dust return. Who knows whether the spirit of the man goes upward and the spirit of the beast go downward to the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring those to see him? What will be after him? So obviously here, I'll get to that. Okay, in this section, the preacher brings up the idea of justice, that question that everyone asks, why do bad things happen to good people? And he's going to expand on this more in the further chapters. I'm not going to touch on that. That's a little hard of a topic. I'm excited to hear what people talk about that. God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. He trusts God in that purpose. And he moves on to the idea that we are all like beasts, all of us, from the dust into dust we shall return. And he says, who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward? So for clarification purpose, this section, he knows that what's going to happen. In the ending chapters of Ecclesiastes, the very end, is things are concluding. He says that our spirit returns to God who gave it. But he begs the question, who knows, right? We need to examine. Prior, he said that God has put eternity into our hearts so that we all know, but we have to think about these things and contemplate them for ourselves. The preacher here in verse 11, right? Let's read that again. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from beginning to end. The preacher here is very wise, and he lets us know that we will never really find out all the mysteries of God. But he puts just enough revelation in us, eternally, innate in us, and it's up to us to trust God with what we can't understand. So, in conclusion, this chapter 3 here, this book wasn't divided into chapters. It was all one continuous thought. But in this section, right, the preacher covered how there's a time for everything and how we should respond to all that God does within that time. So here are some scriptures that I thought were relevant to the topic, some more scriptures. You can write them down and refer to them later, or just listen and contemplate these scriptures with me and how they fit into this idea that God has seasons for us and there is perfect timing for everything. So 2 Corinthians 4, 16 through 18. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. James 1, 17 through 18. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from his workmanship, so that all men are without excuse. So here we are, having to figure out how to trust God with the bigger picture of our lives, with the time and season he has us in, trying to focus on what is unseen, because what is seen is only temporary. Yet we are called to be content in every circumstances and glorifying God for all that he has given us. We are so blessed, and it's hard to focus on that sometimes when we're in the darkest seasons of our life. So I have some small group questions. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 27. Let's do 5 groups of 5. Yeah, something like that. Let's divide as much as we can so that we're not talking over each other. And even if you want to move to a different part of the church, go for it. We can go to the family section over there. You can take a picture of the questions. What time is it here? Oh, my phone's off because it's broken. What time is it? 7:52. All right, let's reconvene, guys. Let's reconvene at 8:15. Okay? 8:15. We'll pray out.